Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm Jonathan Freedman, and our next guest in the studio, Kevin Bibelhausen, president and owner of Heritage Fabrics. Welcome to Radio Entrepreneurs.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
So, Kevin, you've got a really interesting story, and how you came to acquire the company. You want to tell us a little bit about the background and what you discovered along the way towards acquiring a company?
Yeah, so I did what was called self-funded search or acquisition entrepreneurship. I became obsessed with this mode of entrepreneurship back in 2018. The Harvard Business Review Guide to Buying Small Businesses, aptly named, was released in 2017, and I think I got it almost immediately. Somehow heard about it, read it, devoured it, and really connected with one of the stories that was in the book, where one of the quote unquote searchers bought a porta potty business and scaled that and had a great exit. And I knew immediately, I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. I don't feel like I'm a startup guy. I'm not, even though I have a background in technology, I didn't want to go, raise a bunch of VC capital and do some SaaS product. I didn't want to do some social media site or something that I didn't feel like the world actually needed. I wanted to take over an existing business that had product market fit, that had customers, that had cash flow, and then I wanted to grow that business. And hold it indefinitely. My plan is not to sell the company I bought, but it's certainly an option down the road, many years in the future. So I tried to do it.
And the obstacle that you faced, access to capital right out of the gate to be able to
right
acquire.
out of the gate.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's why the first deal failed in 2018. Is that I took this deal and I got to the altar ready to get married, and then the banker was like, actually, we need you to double your equity amount. I'm like, well, I don't have it. That's every dime I have. And so I tried to knock on a couple doors, didn't work, punted on the deal, came back in 2022 and found that there was this whole kind of ecosystem that had popped up. And so there were more people who had kind of gone on this path. And I figured out that you could raise capital, and that I found people that were doing it, and I asked a lot of questions, and through trial and error raised my own capital. I needed to raise about $800,000, so I raised $50,000 at a time in order to get to the equity injection I needed for the acquisition, and was able to finally close the beginning of last year.
Congratulations. So you want to peel that back a little bit and tell people how you went about raising the capital, because I think that story will probably resonate for a lot of our listeners, and some of the lessons learned along the way.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest questions I get. And I talked to a lot of people that are looking to do kind of what I did and do the whole self-funded search thing. And raising capital is it's pretty scary for those of us who don't come from any sort of finance background. I come from operations. But I was able to. The nice thing about our community, our little circle, is that people are very willing to help. And so there's different lists of public domain investors out there. I had about 300 Twitter followers at the time, and I was able to raise a lot of money just networking on Twitter with people who were active in the space. I'll never forget raising from some guy, who's now on the board actually with me, and we had this conversation in DMs, and he's like, so what do I do now? Do I just wire you $100,000? I'm like, yeah, it kind of feels like a scam, doesn't it? But we had a conversation and everything, so he knew who I was, but still, it's right. Pretty nervous.
At some point, he's taking a leap of faith.
Yeah, a pretty major one. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the mechanism and how it worked for you. And as you said, $800,000 from roughly 20 investors or so, 10-ish investors. Yeah. So average raise of about $80,000. Tell us what was the length of time that this took from concept to completion, and some of the lessons learned along the way, if you would share.
Yeah, so it was probably all from LOI to close. It was just over 90 days, so maybe about 100 days or so, 110 days. So that's pretty typical for an SBA loan. Yeah,
not too long.
No.
Manageable.
No, not too long. But I'll tell you what, before you go out and raise capital, you need to have a lot of diligence done already. Because when you go and raise capital from these high net worth individuals and professional investors, they want to see that you've done a quality of earnings study, that you've actually looked at or had a third party verify the financials. that you've done some legal due diligence, that you've done some operational due diligence. And so when you go to them and you're like, you're asking for capital, they want to see that the diligence has been done. So what that means is that you're raising later in the process. And so what they did was it compressed my raising window to probably 6 weeks or so. I was able to raise it in 5, which I was very proud of having only raised capital once for that deal. But I raised it in the absolute worst time of the year. I raised it in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so my parents, when I went back home, to hang out with them over Christmas, I think they thought I was doing some kind of drug deal in the basement, because I basically was in the basement of my parents'
hunker
house.
down mode and
Yeah,
dialing for
yeah, they
dollars, so
thought
to
I was
speak.
insane. They thought I was insane. So, but what that did was it actually I actually enjoyed the process. I enjoyed kind of going through that pain. I'm kind of a sick person, I suppose. But what I figured out is that, and the reason we started our fund called Fruition Capital to invest in these deals is because not everybody is going to have that skill set. Not everybody should have to, necessarily grind through the amount of cold calls, emails, just funnel for investing. It's an entirely different skill set than it takes to run a company. And oftentimes people aren't going to be good at both things, right? So with Fruition Capital, what we started to do was, okay, well, we see the pain that raising for these big deals, $800,000 plus, uh, is on the entrepreneur. So what we're going to do is we're going to professionalize the space. We're going to pool capital, create a fund structure. And so for a deal like mine that required $800,000, instead of going out to these individual investors and trying to raise 50 at a time, Fruition Capital can write into a check into a deal that's $500,000 to $800,000, take out the majority of the raise, and make the entrepreneur's lift a heck of a lot smaller. Meanwhile, we're
Does
able.
that tend to legitimize also for outside investors coming in, where they see, a professional, at least a platform, or
No question.
some.
No question. And it's kind of a virtuous cycle, because we write one of the larger checks in the space. We are kind of at the top of the list as far as pecking order goes when we see deals. We see deals, we have great deal flow. So we're able to evaluate all of these, $1 to $2 million B2B businesses that have been in business for 10 plus years, and that have great sponsors behind them. We're at the top of the list when people come looking for capital. So that makes our portfolio stronger, which makes it more attractive to investors that are coming on. So we're just about to finish our first fund, or close our first fund in the next couple weeks. And then we're looking to open the second fund. First fund was for 5 million. Second fund will be between 15 and 20 million. But yeah, we're noticing a lot of appreciation for the professionalization of the space, both on the entrepreneur side and on the investor side.
Fabulous story. Tell us a little bit about how you identified the company that you acquired. You said you didn't come from the industry, but you were
Nope.
looking for a company that had, some a defined market and opportunity. I assume that part of what attracted you was that the company was in a space that you felt could grow. Perhaps it was somebody who had managed the company or owned the company for a long time, was tired, and have heirs to pass the company to. It wasn't a new generation coming up. But how did you go about that process of identifying the company?
Yeah, so I found the company it was on market through broker here in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I'll tell you what attracted me to the business was the consistent financials. They had reviewed financials every year for the last decade, which in the lower middle market, pretty rare to see reviewed financials. There was a consistent team. The team had been around 15, 20 years, average tenure. The business had traded before, so I bought from the second owner. So I knew the business could transition. And I felt it was in an industry that was it's a textile business. So it's not something that people were looking to like throw capital at, because it's a bit outside of the typical buy box. But I found that there was a lot of meat on the bone in this space, because what I felt like I was buying was infrastructure. So I'm buying 20 years worth of supplier relationships. I'm buying, the experience of the team. I'm buying all the inventory that we carry. And what that allows me to do is build other brands on the back of the infrastructure I already have. I'm already flowing containers from overseas. I'm already got, logistics, employees and plans. And it makes it a lot easier and a heck of a lot cheaper to build slowly these new brands that I can reach other markets with, on the back of, the infrastructure we already
The
have.
infrastructure that you have. So really
Yeah.
levering what you have to be able to grow brands and
You
to
got it.
scale the business. Really a
Yeah.
fascinating story. Have to have you come back and perhaps talk about some of the Fruition Capital investments and how that process is going. But
Yeah, I'd love to.
really, really very interesting. Kevin, if people want to reach out to you and talk further about your own experiences, having raised and acquired, or perhaps Fruition Capital, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
You can find us at fruitioncap.com. I'm also pretty easy to find. There's not many people with my last name, Bibelhausen. So you can find me at Bibelhausen on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn, Kevin Bibelhausen. I promise you I'm the only one.
Wonderful. Our guest has been Kevin Bibelhausen, president and owner of Heritage Fabrics, and also partner in Fruition Capital. Is that the way we
That's correct.
term
Yeah.
you?
Yep.
Excellent. It's been a wonderful story, and thank you for coming on Radio Entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with another segment on Radio Entrepreneurs.